All right, shalom, good people. Sorry for being quiet and silent. The month of November is my month of prayer. I've been praying and just doing a mapping in the realm of the spirit on what it is that needs to be done as we enter into a new year. So normally in the month of November, I take a lot of time to pray and fast. So I'm glad it's almost done. We thank God for the year 2025. It's not over yet. God can still do a sunset miracle. He is a God who never stops working. I want to share something quickly with you from the book of Nehemiah actually, overally. We're gonna start from chapter number 1. Interesting book, amazing book. Every man should read the book of Nehemiah. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing book. So I'm just gonna try and do a series of this book. I'm finding it amazing, starting from the first chapter and see how far we can go. So briefly, I will explain to you. Nehemiah was working at the king's palace. He was working at the king's palace. He was working in the home of a king. Actually, Nehemiah was serving wine to the king. So when they bring wine to the king so that the king may drink, Nehemiah was the wine tester. Nehemiah was the one who would take the wine and test it before he gives it to the king. So Nehemiah was the cup bearer to the king. That's what he was doing. That's what he was paid for. And as you read from verses number 3, Scripture records that when Nehemiah was serving as usual, living life as usual, working as usual, one of his brothers called Hanan came, and when he came with a report. And this report was not a good report, it was a bad report. He came to tell Nehemiah that the wall of Jericho has been brought down, and the wall of Jerusalem, not Jericho, the wall of Jerusalem has been brought down, and the gates of Jerusalem are burnt down to ashes. Scripture records that when Nehemiah heard this, he was broken. Scripture records that he sat down and he wept and he mourned. But when he heard this, Scripture says he mourned, he wept, and after he mourned and wept, he fasted and he prayed. Nehemiah did not stay in his broken state. At some point, he arose and he began to fast and pray. I want to speak to someone and say your situation is not going to change just by remaining broken and remaining in the mourning garment. But your situation will begin to take shape the moment you begin to fast and pray. Fast forward, Scripture says Nehemiah had never served the king wine or been before the king with a sad face. But Scripture records that after he fasted and he prayed, I don't know who can relate to this book of Isaiah, that I started my year very well. I was planning my year very well, but in the midst of it, I received news that were not pleasing, news that almost broke me. In chapter number 1, after he fasted and he prayed, he could not hide it anymore. When he took the wine to the king noticed that Nehemiah was not himself. And the king asked Nehemiah what happened. And Nehemiah said, my people in Jerusalem are in great trouble, in verse number 3. And they're in great trouble and they are in disgrace. Why? Because the walls are broken and the gates are bent. I want to speak to every man who is listening to this and say, the brokenness of the wall and the burning of the gates to ashes from the walls of Jerusalem represents the covering that you bring to a family as a man. Every household that does not have a man is like a city without walls. Every household that has a father that is not present, a father that is always drinking and chasing skates, never have time to spend time with their kids, never have never have a chance to spend time with their wives. They are like a city without walls. Nehemiah said, my people are in great trouble and are in disgrace. A family without a covering is a family that is going to live in disgrace. What is the covering of a family? The Apostle Paul says, men, follow me as I follow Christ. So in my household, my kids, when they want something, they go to their mom. Their mom comes to me and I take it to God as the covering of the home. Every man who is watching this, I want you to get this. Every home that does not have a present father is like a city with the walls that are broken. If you are a father and you have never been available for your children, you are like, your family is like a city without walls. He says, my people are in disgrace. When the wall was broken, the protection was taken away. When the wall of Jerusalem was broken, the covering was taken away. When the wall was broken, there was no protection to the people that lived behind, within the four walls of Jerusalem, because the walls were broken. I want to speak to someone and say, Nehemiah mourned and cried unto the Lord. And not only did he mourn, but he prayed and fasted. And scripture said when he fasted, the king noticed and he asked him, what is it? What is it that is making you scared? And what is it that is making you sad? And scripture says that Nehemiah said to the king, my people are in a great distress because the walls have been broken. The walls have been destroyed. To every man who is watching this, how strong is the wall that you have put behind around your family? How strong is the wall that is around, that is protecting your family? As long as the wall of Jerusalem remained broken, they remained unprotected. As long as the wall of Jerusalem remained broken, its people remained unprotected. Then scripture said, when Nehemiah told the king granted him his request. The king told Nehemiah to go and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. In other words, the king gave Nehemiah a permission. In other words, the king knew the importance of having a wall around a family, of having a wall around a nation. A nation without a wall is a nation that is vulnerable to the enemy. And a nation without a wall is a nation that does not have power. A nation without a wall is a nation that has its daughters raped, molested. Why? Because the protection is taken away. The king understood the importance of a wall. That's why the king granted Nehemiah his request to go and rebuild the wall. Nehemiah, scripture records that not only did Nehemiah was granted his request to go and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. Scripture records that the king actually gave Nehemiah the materials and the army to protect him as he go to rebuild the wall. The king clearly understood the assignment. He understood the importance of a city that has walls and a city that does not have a wall. A city that has its jewel broken is a city that lacks protection. A family without a father figure is like a city without a wall. A father represents protection. A father represents covering, like a hen, like a chicken that spreads its feathers to cover its hen, to cover its babies. Scripture records that the king granted Nehemiah his request to go and rebuild. I believe the king did this because he understood the importance of a nation that has a war. And scripture records that in chapter number 1, verses number 12, from verse number 12 to verse number 16, scripture records that when Nehemiah arrived at Jerusalem, he did not tell anyone. Scripture said he woke up at night and he went and he inspected the wall. He inspected to check, he examined the wall to check how much work needed to be done. How much work needed to be done. The story of Nehemiah is like me and you at the beginning of the year in January. We thought we had it all figured out. But along the way, we received the bad news that the war has been broken down. We received the bad news, like me, at some point, that your mother has passed away. We received the news that brought us down onto our knees. But staying in our mourning garments is not going to change the situation. The situation is going to change when you begin to pray and fast. Scripture says Nehemiah prayed and fasted before he went to speak to the king to ask for permission to go. There is something that happens when a man begins to pray. The Lord will begin to move people from all the four corners. He begin to move destiny partners, people that are going to make your things move, people that are going to make your things easy. And scripture says after he fasted and prayed, the king said, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" Listen to this. In verses number 19, chapter number 2, verses number 19, scripture says, when Sanballat and Tobiah heard that Nehemiah came back to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, they became so angry and they begin to oppose them. They begin to fight them with all they had. And in the next installment, I'm going to share with you the things that they said, the things they did to oppose, to make sure that Nehemiah will be distracted, will not focus on rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. And in chapter number 2, verse 19 says, they begin to speak things that will discourage Nehemiah from rebuilding the wall. My lesson from this particular part that I've shared with you is that the enemy is not moved by you talking, but the enemy is intimidated when he sees you starting to rebuild the walls that were broken in your life. When Nehemiah was praying, the enemy didn't do anything. He did not face any opposition. When Nehemiah was crying and mourning after he received the bad news, the enemy was happy. He did not ridicule him. He did not speak bad of him. But the fight started when the enemy heard that Nehemiah has come to rebuild. I want to speak to someone and say, opposition could be a pointer to say you are building something amazing. Accusations and oppositions could be a pointer to say what you are building and what you're about to do is the right direction. What you're building is an amazing thing. The enemy is intimidated by people who build. The enemy is intimidated by people who are available for their family. The enemy is intimidated by men who give time and protection to their family. Fathers that are present. Fathers that do whatever it takes. Fathers that take their kids to school. Fathers that provide for their family. These are like a wall. When the enemy heard that Nehemiah was rebuilding, he got angry. Why? Because he knew that he would not have access again because the wall would have been built. Could it be every time you see opposition in your life, the enemy will be angry that you are now protected and you are now covered? The enemy is not intimidated by you dating. The enemy will start bringing opposition the moment he hears that you are about to get married, the moment he hears that you are about to build something, the moment he hears that you are about to start that business, the moment he hears that you are about to strike that deal, the moment he hears that you are about to buy that car, the moment he hears that you are about to marry that girl, he brings his opposition. Opposition is not a sign of failure. It's not a sign of failure. but opposition could be a pointer and a sign that you are walking in the same direction. I will see you in the next installment as we start the book of Nehemiah. Until then, shalom.